Morning, everybody. My name is Michael Conlon. I used to be a teacher at Perth Grammar School, a good friend of Mrs. Moyer, and she asked me to talk about books this morning and about reading for pleasure and how we get into books. And so this is my story. I'm from a family of eight. I was originally brought up in Cumbernauld, and we didn't have a lot of books, if any books, in our house growing up at all. And so the kind of stories we heard were mostly kind of, stories people would tell each other, kind of the usual kind of verbal storytelling. But I loved stories, and I loved reading when I found out how to read at school. But we didn't have access to the kind of books that a lot of other children had at home. There was too many of us in our house, to be honest. We couldn't afford books, and if you think a book is maybe £7 or something like that just now, if you've got 6 children and they're all needing a book, then it's quite expensive. So I was born and brought up in Glasgow and in Cumbernauld, and one of the most powerful things we had there were libraries, and that sounds a bit ridiculous to say that, but libraries give us power. They helped many young people across Glasgow, across Scotland, to take themselves out of poverty because they had access to books that people who were more well off had access to. And that was amazing to me, that I could walk into a library and take out 3 books. I didn't have to pay for them, and I could read them and take as long as I needed to read them, and then bring them back and get another 3, and that was absolutely amazing. And it's no word of a lie that it did take me out of poverty. I'm not living in poverty at all. It's because I managed to get myself reading at a very early age, and reading lots of stories and learning lots of new words and learning about lots of different characters and lots of different places. And what that gave me was confidence in reading, and it gave me confidence in words, and that helped me with my education. There's absolutely no two ways about it. They've done research and studies and found that when you're young and you're poor, if you don't have access to language, if you've got a lower vocabulary, if you don't have access to books, then your outcomes are poorer than those who have access to rich language and to rich reading and to rich books. And that's not fair, really. So libraries were the great equaliser for our family and for many families, that we could have access to the same kind of books and the same kind of reading that people who were perhaps better off than we were had. And that meant that we could get a decent education and we could learn lots of new things. The thing I like most about reading is that I grew up in Cumbernauld. It wasn't the most exciting place in the world. But when you get a book and you're reading a story, you're learning about whole new worlds, you're learning about a whole new range of characters. And when you do that, it actually builds up a sense of empathy in you, because you're hearing about other people's stories, you're hearing about their perspectives in life and their ideas, and that lets you put yourself in other people's shoes. It's one of the great imaginative leaps you'll do when you read the book, is put yourself in other people's shoes. Television's great, right? I love television, Game of Thrones and movies like Endgame. Absolutely unbelievable. But the problem with TV and YouTube and all these other things is they're a very passive medium. And what I mean by passive is that you don't have to do any of the work, right? All the images come to you. The way the character looks comes to you. The direction where the camera is comes to you. You've got no choices really when you're watching a TV programme. You don't have to do anything. Which is why we kind of like it to veg out at night, just sit there at the TV and go, because it comes to you. All the imagination comes to you. You don't have to do much work. In a book, that's slightly different. You've got to paint what the character looks like. You've got to paint what the scenes look like. The writer's given you all the words to try and describe it, and there was loads of words I didn't know, right? I didn't have a clue what half of these words meant. But what I could do is I could look them up in a thesaurus and find out, oh, that's what that word means. Fine, right, okay, move on. But you have to do all the work in a book, which might sound like, oh, it's rubbish. But when you connect with a book, it's because you're doing the painting with the words. You're creating all the scenes. You're the director. You're the guy that decides what your character sounds like, what they look like, how they move, how they dress. That's amazing for your imagination. And when you read, you are creating the characters through in your own eyes and in your own head. So you're doing a lot of the work, and that brings you closer to the characters. That makes you more empathetic to the characters, because you've essentially helped create them and put them into your imagination. And when we're more empathetic, when we become better listeners, when we become better and bigger with our imagination. That helps us in all areas of our life, all areas of the curriculum, all areas of our personal relationships with other people. It really brings you a huge advantage in your later life. People continue to read as they get older because they know it's very healthy for the brain. The brain is a muscle in many respects, and reading and imaginative reading helps make sure that muscle is strong and keeps working. And many people have said, as you move into your older ages, and lots of people suffer from dementia. So if you read, you're really making that muscle an awful lot stronger. You're making it more resilient. We know that if you cut yourself and you bleed, it will heal because your blood clots, right? Your blood clots and makes you better. Reading's a bit like that for the brain. When you come across a crisis, when you come across a piece of stress, because you've done lots of reading, lots of imaginative reading, and used your brain in lots of different ways, your brain can then cope better with that stress, and it can cope better with these different situations because you've got lots of stories in your head and you've got lots of different pathways in your brain that you can now take to solve your problem, to get past that stressful moment and into something a bit better. I'm absolutely convinced of that. So talking about the kind of books that I had, because I was number 5 out of 6, and books helped me escape from the noise that was in our house. It was really loud because loads of people in it. Could be quite stressful at times, lots of shouting and arguing and stuff like that, which is quite stressful for a young boy. But when you open up a book, you can completely escape inside it. I'm not anywhere else, I'm in the book, and everything else that's happening around me is, been and gone and done it. I'm in my book and I've escaped from all of that, and that's one of the great things that happened to me, is that I had a place to escape to. And it was the books that I got from the library. Lots of fantasy books and really, really rich character books. Loads of great stories. And there were some books I picked up and went, you got halfway through and I'm like, oh, this is rubbish. Right, I kept going to the end, but it helped me figure out what I liked and what I don't like, essentially. But for a young man who was not entirely confident, I was confident when I went to books, and it helped me have an escape place. And one of my greatest pleasures, and it continues to be one of the greatest pleasures of my life. So, going to introduce you to some books that I loved growing up. First one is Adolf Hitler, My Part in His Downfall, by a guy called Spike Milligan. He's a famous British comedian. He took part in the Second World War, and he was unfortunately got bombed and was shell shocked and had a bit of a terrible time after that. But his memoirs about his time in the war are absolutely hilarious. My mum came into my room, what are you laughing at? What are you laughing at? And it was because I was reading this book, and it was making me laugh out loud, and it was taking me into World War II, which of course I'd never been in World War II, but it was painting pictures and telling stories which were absolutely hilarious and fascinating to me. And this is what we call an autobiography, so it's his story in his own words, so it's a true story. Another book that made me laugh out loud an awful lot was something called Adrian Mole, The Diary of a Teenager. Go and read that book if you're that kind of age. That's the book for you. The next book is a book called Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut. It's a kind of fantasy book. That's really difficult to describe. That's what's great about it. Billy Pilgrim can jump forwards and backwards in time. He goes back to the Second World War. He can jump straight into the future on different planets. I love this book. I've read it loads of times. And then because I loved this book, I went, I wonder if he's got other books. If he's got other books, I'm going to go and try and read them. And I've gone and read just about every book that Kurt Vonnegut's ever written. He's amazing. Star of the Sea by Joseph O'Connor. It sounds really rubbish. It's about a boat. What's that all about? But it's full of amazing characters. This is quite a recent book, actually. Recent when you're my age. It's unbelievably powerful and really makes your mind work. It really exercises the brain. But a fantastic story. Now, the next bit is a bit queer, because when I was about 37, 38, I suddenly developed epilepsy, right? So I started having seizures, and I was having seizures in school, at Perth Grammar School too. Of course, what I used to have to say to the kids is, right guys, see, if I have a seizure in class, I don't remember any of it, right? I'll wake up later and I don't remember any of it. It's all a bit foggy. So don't use that as an excuse to give me a kicking. See, when I'm lying on the ground, don't get Conlon. They never did that, but we used to have a good laugh about it. When I got epilepsy and I woke up and it was fine, what I noticed is I wasn't really interested in fiction anymore. Wasn't really interested in fiction. I would pick books up and I would go, this isn't great. And I started moving towards more non-fiction, real stories, real things that happened. And I've begun to find them even more fascinating, whether it was World War II or the space race, or my all-time favourite book now is Bill Bryson's A Short History of Nearly Everything. I absolutely love this book, and I have read it loads and loads of times. I try and read it at least once a year. It really is a short history of chemistry, physics, loads and loads and loads of stuff, all about the history of science, essentially, in the world. Love it. Got pictures in the book, etc. But once I read it again, and then, really bizarrely, I then bought a hardback version of the book, which has got loads of stuff in it, pictures and all sorts of things, and I read this. I have got a version on my Kindle, which I can read anytime I like, and I've also got the audiobook version, which is somebody reading the book out to me when I'm driving in the car. It's a bit obsessive, I suppose, but there's always something new and interesting when I read it, and read it, as I say, once a year. My other great book is a book which is all about, called Reclaiming History, which is about the JF Kennedy assassination. It's fabulous, but it's dead thick, and it takes forever. I've only read that twice. So in terms of reading books, what's it done for me? It's given me my imagination. It's given me a place to escape to. It's a place for me to reduce my stress, and it's given me years and years of pleasure. And I hope that you get some of that in your life. I'm a big fan of balance, so balance in TV. I've got a balance when I play my PlayStation. I've got a balance in my book reading, because it just makes you a richer person. And reading for pleasure really exercises that brain and lets you have an inner life, a life that is not your friends and not your family, and it just belongs to you. And that's something quite precious. Thank you.